v'chutlim koima. So if one shechted the carbon toida with a machshava of pigel, chus l'zmano is a machshava of pigel that makes the carbon usher with an iser kares, and chutlim koima just makes it usher. So the halach is kidesh lechem, the lechem of the toida becomes kadosh, but shachtov and nimtzas treifa, there it's loy kidesh lechem. Shachtov and nimtzas balmum, Rabbi Eliezer Omer Kidesh, V'Chachamim Omer Loi Kidesh, and that's going to require some explanation, because why is Balmum different than the Treva? Shachta Shaloi L'Shema, what if Shachta Shaloi L'Shema, V'chein Eil Hamiluyim, V'chein Shnei Kivsei Atzeres, all of these carbonas that all have lechem that's connected to them, Shachta Shaloi L'Shema, well, is Loi Kidesh Alechem. If you notice, there is one important carbon that's missing from this list, because let's think all of the carbonas that have lechem associated with them. We have the toida, we have the elamiluyim, we have the kivsei atzeres, but we also have the shalmei nazir. That, for some reason, the Mishnah decided to omit. Zog to Gemara, Masnisin Mani Reb Meir. Our Mishnah is following the Shita of Reb Meir. The Tanya we learned, Zaklal, this is the rule. Kol shepisuloi koidim shchita. If the psul was before the shchita, for instance, a treifa, even before we shechted it, it was already an animal that was a treifa that wasn't royal to be a carbon. So therefore, loy kiddush alechem. But pisuloi acher shchita, but if the psul only came after the shchita, such as a machshav of pigol, then the halach is kidesh alechem. So therefore, shachta chutz l'zmano v'chutz l'mkoima would be kidesh alechem, just like our Mishnah says. Shachta v'niptzas treifa loy kidesh alechem, just like our Mishnah says. Shachta v'nimtas balmum, Rabbi Eliezer omer kidesh, which would be the same machlokes in our Mishnah. Rabbi Shua omer loy kidesh divrei Reb Meir. We still need to know why Kiddush and why not Kiddush, but the Gemara is going to get into that later. Rav Yehuda argues on Reb Meir, and he has a different version of what the machloikis was between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua, and that shows that he doesn't agree with our Tana. Because Rabbi Yehuda says, L'nechlu Rabbi Eliezer v'Rabbi Yeshua al sheshachta v'nimtzas treifa shaloi Kiddush. That stems so far with our Mishnah. V'achut l'zmanoi shekidesh, that stems with our Mishnah. V'abalmum shaloi kidesh, that no longer stems with our Mishnah. V'alman nechleku al chutz l'mkoimai. Again, in our Mishnah, it says everybody holds it's kidesh, but in Rabbi Yehuda's version, there's a machlokes dafka by chutz l'mkoimai. She Rabbi Eliezer omer kidesh, Rabbi Yeshua omer lo kidesh. So now we need an explanation for two things. Why would there be a machlokes by a balmum, whether it's kiddush or not kiddush, and why is there a machlokes by chutz l'mkoimai, whether it's kiddush or not kiddush? Rabbi Eliezer, hoyel v'chutz l'zmanai pasul. So Rabbi Eliezer made an argument to Rabbi Yeshua. Chutz l'zmanai is pasul, v'chutz l'mkoimai is pasul. Very similar psulim in the carbon. Ma chutz l'zmanai kiddush. Chutz l'zmanai, you agree with kiddush. So av chutz l'mkoimai kiddush. Very good taina. Rabbi Yeshua. Chutz l'zmanai comes with a chi of koresh if you eat it, but it's not a different type. It's still a psul that happened after the shechita. So it should be kiddush. I hear. Very good. A lesser psul even. Rabbi Yeshua, hoyel v'chutz l'mkoimai pasul, ubalmum pasul, ma balmum loy kiddush, af chutz l'mkoimai loy kiddush. Rabbi Yeshua compares it to balmum. Omer loy Rabbi Eliezer, anida misiu l'chutz l'zmanoi. I compare it l'chutz l'zmanoi, and therefore I claim that it should be kiddush. V'atu demisi l'balmum, and that's why you say it's loy kiddush. Let's actually see who's right. Nir l'mi doime. Im doime l'chutz l'zmanoi. If we can all come to the agreement that chutlam koimoi is most similar to chutlas manoi, nidainenu me chutlas manoi, vim daimel balmum. But if it's more similar to a balmum, then I'll agree to you. Then nidainenu me balmum. So his chol Rabbi Eliezer lodum. So Rabbi Eliezer made the first argument to say that it should be like chutz l'zmanoi. Done in psul machshava mi psul machshava. What's the psul of chutz l'koimoi? It's a bad machshava b'shas t'shchita. So let's learn the halacha of a bad machshava b'shas t'shchita of chutz l'koimoi from a bad machshava of chutz l'zmanoi, where we know there it is kiddush. But the ain't done in psul machshava mi psul aguf. How could you compare chutz l'koimoi, which is a psul machshava, to a psul of balmum, which is in the guf of the animal itself? That was Rabbi Eliezer's taina. So Rabbi Yeshua responded with some very good tainas. His Rabbi Yeshua lodin, done in psul she'ein by chorus, mi psul she'ein by chorus, which is really David's mahalach. You look at how bad, how severe the psul is. Val yochiach chutz l'zmanoi she'psul she'yesh by chorus. It doesn't have the same results, but at least it's focusing on the severity of the problem. V'oid, that's question number one. V'oid nidunenu mishaloi l'shmoi, and even if you want to compare it, Rabbi Eliezer, to something that's a machshava psul, so look at the machshava psul of shaloi l'shmoi, shepsul machshava. Ve'ein by chorus, which is exactly like chutz l'koimoi, and by chutz l'shmoi it doesn't pass. It's not mekadosh to lechem. So this is mamash a checkmate. The shasuk Rebbe Eliezer. This was a checkmate because we found another item to compare it to, which is a machshava. It's a machshava psula of shaloi l'shmoi, and there's no chi of chorus. It's just a pasul of carbon. And what's the halacha by shaloi l'shmoi? We said like kiddush lechem. So it's such a stark taina, Rabbi Eliezer was shasuk. So this is how Rabbi Yehuda understood the machlokes. Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua, it's about chutz l'koimoi, and at the end Rabbi Eliezer was maida. So the maskana would be that everybody would agree that chutz l'koimoi like kiddush lechem. Zog to Gemara of Rabbi Meir. According to Rabbi Meir, who makes the machlokes about shachta v'nimtzis balmum, ma'ishna shachta v'nimtzis treifa, to have a psulei koidim shchita, and therefore it's like kiddush lechem. Umayishna shachta v'nimtzis balasamum, the lay have a psulei koidim shchita. I'm sorry. Ma'ishna shchita v'nimtzis treifa, to have a psulei koidim shchita. Its psul was there in existence before the shchita, and therefore we say that the like kiddush lechem umayishna shachta v'nimtzis balmum, and why is that different than if he shechted and it became a balmum? The loy have a psuloi kodim shchita. The Gemara says it's loy have a psuloi kodim shchita. I'm not sure. You're right. I'm also stuck. I don't have that. Let's see what Rashi says. Let's have a look.
I think that's what he's asking.
What do you mean?
According to Mayor, what's the difference between treifa and balmum? Ma'ishna shachta v'nimtzis treifa.
Right.
Psul kodim shchita.
Right.
Consider it psul kodim shchita. Ma'ishna v'nimtzis balmum. The way I was psul kodim shchita.
That you don't consider it that way?
Yeah.
Is that what it's saying? Okay. So Zok to Gemara, you know why? Because we're speaking about a special type of mum, bedukin sheba ayin, which could be it's a cataract, it's a psul in the eye. V'alibadur Rabbi Kiva, the amrim alolo yerdu. So the halach is normally if an animal's a balmum, it's considered a mum koidim shchita, and therefore the halach is any mum that was before the shchita, before it became kodesh, any korban that's disqualified before it could even become kodesh. The halach is alulo yerdu. If you put it up on the mizbeach by mistake, you shechted it, and now by mistake it ended up on the mizbeach, it's yerdu. But if it's a mum that happened after the shechita, for instance, a psul of pigol or yoytze or noiser, any one of these other psulim, you're not supposed to put that meat on the mizbeach. But if you did put it on the mizbeach, there's a halacha the mizbeach is koyletim olu lo yerdu. Dukin sheba'ayin is a slight mum that if, according to Rabbi Kiva, if you placed that meat on the mizbeach, it would be lo yerdu. So even though every other balmum, if you put it up on the mizbeach, you'd have to take it off because it was psuloi koydim l'kedusha before it even became kodesh. The mum of dukin sheba'ayin is an exception. It's alu lo yerdu. V'zokt gemar Rabbi Yeshua, and Rabbi Yeshua who holds that it's like Kiddush Lechem. Ki Amar Rabbi Kiva, where did Rabbi Kiva say his halacha im olu yerdu is psula de gufei? Fazoi vayit, the meat itself im olu yerdu. I'll agree. Avol kedusha lechem loy. But if fazoi vayit that it should also be mekadosh to lechem, even though it's a balmum, that wouldn't work. So therefore, Rabbi Yeshua holds it will be loy kiddush lechem by a balmum of dukin sheba'ayin, and Rabbi Eliezer holds it would be mekadosh lechem by mum of dukin sheba'ayin, because the mum of dukin sheba'ayin is again not as bad as a regular mum, because according to Rabbi Kiva, it's an olu lo yerdu. The meat will still end up on the mizbeach, so it's somewhat royal the mizbeach. The question is that good enough to also make it be mekadosh lechem or not? Rabbi Yeshua holds not. Rabbi Eliezer holds yes. Zog to Gemara, Itmar chatos sheshachta chutz lezman. You shechted a carbon chatos with a machshava of chutz lezmana that the dam would be spritzed or the basar would be eaten chutz lezmana. There the halacha is im also loy tered. Why? Because it's a psul that came after the animal became kodesh, so it has the rule of if you wrongfully put the meat on the mizbeach, even though you weren't supposed to, or the imurim on the mizbeach, even though you were not supposed to, you don't take it off. The mizbeach is choylet. Chutz l'mkayma. What if the machshava was chutz l'mkayma? Rava Amar tered, Rabba Amar loy tered. The Rabba Amar loy tered is easy to understand. Rav Amar tered, why should it be any different than chutz l'zmanai? Zok to Gemara, maybe Rava Rabbi Yeshua. Maybe Rava holds like Rabbi Yeshua, that holds that it won't be mekadosh lechem. The Rabbi Rabbi Eliezer, and Rabbi would hold like Rabbi Eliezer. So again, we want to say that it's also Rava says also tered by also of chutz l'mkayma, and we want to say that would work according to Rabbi Eliezer. So let's have a look who we're referring to when we say Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua, because we have to be going not according to Rabbi Meir's understanding, but according to Rabbi Yehuda's understanding, where there's a shaila about chutz l'mkayma, not by balmum. So let's have a look at Rashi. Chatos v'chol shekein shar zvachim sheshach the chutz l'zmanim also loy tered. Da'amrinim b'meseches nida beperek yoytze doifen teir achas l'chol ha'olam im olu lo yerdu. Anything that was put on the mizbeach, you don't take off. Rabba, Rabbi Yeshua, the medame lay lebalmum. Rabbi Yeshua compared chutz l'mkayma to a balmum. Ubalmum amrinon hasam im alayered. And the balmum, we know the halacha is im alayered, a regular balmum, not a dukin sheba'ayin. The katana yochal shani marba haray v'nirva. Ad marba niyas elu shepisulan b'kodesh umoita niyas elu she'en pisulan b'kodesh. If it became possible after it had a kedushas carbon, there we say im olu lo yerdu. But if the psul came even before it had a kedushas carbon, such as a balmum, because a balmum could have never received the kedushas carbon, there you say im olu yerdu. So let's say that Rava, who by chutz l'mkayma wants to say lo yerdu, Rava Amar loy tered. Rabba Rabbi Yehuda, Rabba is Rabbi Yehuda. The medama le'balmum, right? And in balmum Allah yered. So therefore, Rabba will hold im Allah yered, and Rava Amar loy tered. He'll hold like Rabbi Eliezer. The medama le'il chutz l'mkayma l'chutz l'zmanai. So according to the understanding of Rabbi Yehuda, where the machloikis between Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yeshua is in a case of chuslam koimai, not in the case of a balmum, but it's in the case of chuslam koimai. Does chuslam koimai compare to a balmum, and therefore you should also say im alu yered, or is it compared to chuslam zmanoi, where it's im alu yered? So that's how the Gemara wants to propose is the explanation of the machloikis between Rava, who said tered because it's like a balmum, and Rabbi loy tered because it's like chuslam zmanoi. Rava Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Eliezer, the way Rabbi Yehuda understood our Mishnah. But at the end of the day, v'hader bei Rabba l'gabei de Rava, Rabba was chayzer and agreed at the end to say tered. Why? Mid'hader bei Rabbi Eliezer l'gabei de Rabbi Yeshua, because in the brisa that explains the machlokes according to Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yeshua ended up asking a kasha on Rabbi Eliezer, and Rabbi Eliezer was shoisik. And what was the kasha? He said, compare chutzlum koimai to a machshav of shaloi l'shma, which is surely not mekadesh to lechem. And therefore, we're not comparing it to chutz l'zmanoi, and therefore, we would all hold like Rabbah, who says, we would all hold like Rava, who holds tered. Okay. Zok to Gemara weiter. I'm sorry. It says Hader Bey Rabba Lagabi de Rava. Rava said tered. He would hold like tered. Why? Because at the end of the day, Rabbi Eliezer was chosher to agree with Rabbi Yeshua. Zok to Gemara. The Ikad Amri. There are those who say Alpha Gab the Hader Bey Rabbi Eliezer Lagabi de Rabbi Yeshua. Even though Rabbi Eliezer was chosher Lagabi Rabbi Yeshua and was moida that chutzlim koimai would be like Shaloi L'Shema, and would not be Mekadosh to Lechem, still Rabba L'Gabi de Rava Loi Hadabei. Still maybe Rabba wasn't Chosher and agree with Rava, and maybe Rabba maintains that Im Allah Loi Sered. Why? Why would there be a difference? Zakta Gemara, Hasamudik Amrlei Nidunenu Mishaloi L'Shema. When we were looking to know what the halach is with the Lechem, we had something to compare it to. We were able to compare it to Shaloi L'Shemai, where it's Psulim Achshava, there's no Chiyuv Kares, and guess what? It's not Mekadosh to Lechem. Aval Hacha, Idainis Leim Shaloi L'Shemai, if you're going to compare it to Shaloi L'Shemai, guess what? A carbon or shech Shaloi L'Shemai also has the halach of Loi Sered. Im also Loi Sered. So yes, you could compare Chutz L'M Kaimai to Shaloi L'Shema, and therefore you'll conclude that it's not Mekadosh to Lechem. But by the same token, you'll also conclude Im also Loi Sered, because that is halacha by Shaloi L'Shema. Gewaltig. Shachna Shaloi L'Shema. Frag the Gemara an obvious shaila. Amar Papa Shabak Tana Didan El Nazir the Shchiach v'Nachet El HaMiluyim. El HaMiluyim happened once. It's not Negei anymore. It's not Negei anymore. It happened by the Miluyim. El Nazir is Negei. So why would the Tana omit the example of Shaloi L'Shema in reference to El Nazir and rather talk about the Shaloi L'Shema of El HaMiluyim? And for the Gemara, V'Tana Didan Ikr Milsa Nakat. Where did this whole thing start? Where did this whole thing start? That the Lechem is not Kodesh. If it's Shaloi L'Shema, it started from El HaMiluyim. That was the first time we encountered such a thing. So the Tana wanted to give that example. As Rashi says, Ikr Milsa Nakat Miluyim Karvit Chila L'Chalak Karbonis. It was the very first carbon that was brought. And that's where we have that halacha. So the Tana wanted to present that one. The Karban Yacharu, V'odin El Nazir. Who in El Nazir would have the same halacha? Why the Mishnah didn't say both? I don't know. I'm not sure if there's a limit of 3. I'm not sure what the reason for it is. Okay, Gewaltig. Zog the Gemara weiter. Omar zog the Mishnah weiter. And Nesachim shekitzu b'chli. We have Nesachim that are wine that you're going to pour in them mizbeach. You put them into a klei, so now they have a kedusha. And then the nimtza zevach pasol. And the carbon for which we were bringing these nesachim, because nesachim are connected to a carbon, and the carbon ended up being pasol. So you have nesachim. Did they take on kedusha? or not. I don't know. But the halacha is, if there's another carbon there, they can just use these nesachim for another carbon, which means that even though they're kitchu b'chli, they're not going to be linked to that carbon. We can actually divert them to a different carbon. No, not necessarily. So maybe. You mean the question is you're repurposing for different? Maybe we could, or you could buy it off, or maybe it is similar. So Zok to Gemara, ve'imlav yifsulu belina. If not, they become possible. That you should leave them to become possible belina. We're going to have to see what that means as well. The Mishnah says not ve'imlav, rather imlanu yifsulu belina, meaning they did take on kedushas aguf, and therefore they're subject to the psul of lina. Zok to Helik Gemara, Amar Ziri, ein hanesachim miskachin ela b'shchitas hazevach. So our Mishnah says they became kodesh b'chli v'nim tezevach posel. Ziri says something that's slightly different. Will that fit in with her Mishnah? Ein hanesachim miskachin. The nesachim will not take on the kedushas aguf ela b'shchitas hazevach until the shchita is done, even though it's already in a klesharis. Now, very interesting. We have al machloikish rishonim over here. What Zeiri means when he says nisachim miskachin. So the Ksav Yad Rashi says lipasel belina uveyotzei. When we say miskachin means to become kedushas aguf, and therefore it will become possible belina uveyotzei. But if you look at the Rashi on top, he has a different shot that's not going to be so easy to understand. The Gemara moving forward according to his pshat. So we're going to stick to the pshat of Rashi Ksav Yad, which incidentally the Art Scroll does as well. So let's have a look at how the regular Rashi says. Ella ein ella b'shchitas hazavach, the kodim shchitas hazavach, afal pisha nitnu b'chlisharis. Even though they're in a klisharis already, inun chulin, they're chulin, or is it toilin? I can't even read it. It's chulin. V'yochol l'shanoisoi lezevach achar, u'mishanishchar hazavach loy. So Ziri's halacha is not talking about psul aguf. That maybe it gets even as soon as it goes into klisharis. What the shchita does is it links the nesachim to this carbon, and now you can apply it to a different carbon. So our Mishnah would be speaking before the shchita, but after the shchita you could no longer apply it to a different carbon. But our Rashi Ksav Yad says not like that. The whole discussion here is only if it's possible. So Zog to Gemara, my timer, Amar Kra, Zevach u'nesachim. So you see the nesachim are connected to the zevach. Once the shchita is done, then the nesachim become nesachim, and according to Ksav Yad Rashi, and then they'll be possible lino v'yotzei. Tanan we learned our Mishnah, and nesachim shekichu b'chli v'nimtach zevach posel. So the halacha is im yesh zevach achar yikruhu imay. You could divert it to a different carbon. That's A. And v'imlav or v'imlanu, if you want to change the gear, so like the Shita does, v'imlanu yifsulu belina. So what exactly happened in our Mishnah? You put in the sachem in a keli, and the zevach became possible. How did it become possible? What happened to it? My love, the ifsal b'shchita. Probably it became possible during the shchita. In other words, there was a possible machshava there or something. So my love, the ifsal b'shchita. So the problem here is, if it's ifsal b'shchita, there's different ways to understand. There's actually two pshatim in the Rashi Ksav Yad as to what the problem is. But let's hear what Rashi says over here. My love, the ifsal b'shchita, the loy kiddishinu zvicha l'nesachim. If the shchita became possible, then the zvicha would not be mekadosh the nesachim, because Ziri said, but if it was a disqualified shchita, then it wouldn't have been mekadosh to nesachim, the psulahi, because it was a possible shchita, right? Vikatani, what is our Mishnah paskin in that halacha? Imlanu yifsalu belina, which clearly is bigaris Imlonu, not imlav. Imlonu yisubelina. So you see this, there is a psulina, even though it wasn't a good shechita. So this is not consistent with what Zeiri said. My love, this was shchita. The ifsa was rika. It was a good shchita, and that's why the nesachim take on the kedushas aguf and they're possibilina, because the psul didn't occur till the rika, but the shchita was good. So now what we're saying is even though the rika is no good, if the shchita is good, it's enough that it makes the nesachim into a kedushas aguf to be possibilina. Zok Gemara, that's not so simple. Come on. It must be going according to Rebbe. The Omar Shnei Devarim Hamatirin Mailen Zeh Beloy Zeh. The two Devarim Hamatirin of a carbon, which are the Shchita and the Zrika, one or the other would be able to be Mekadosh. Now this Shaila was relevant. When you had by Kivsei Atzeres. The question is what linked the Lechem to the Kivsei Atzeres. If we look at Rashi, Kaman mekasha shchita luchudei lenesachim, kerebi damer shnei devarim amatirim kod shchita v'zrika mile zeh the Omar beperek hatcheles shochat lishmon, and we're talking about here the kifsei atzeres v'zorak damon shaloi lishmon halechem kadosh ve'ena kadosh. So you see, the shchita alone creates a kedusha. The Kaddish vein the Kaddish, there's a whole machlokes in the Gemara what it means. Lagabe Pediya, but al kolponim, the shchita alone, without the zrika, is able to make the lechem, which is also linked to the kifsei atzeres, it makes it Kaddish. And therefore, over here as well, the shchita alone would have made the nesachim into kedushas aguf, and therefore, if they were yotzei or if there was a lina, that'll be possible. But if you need both, because the man holds that the lachmei toida don't get their, not the lachmei toida, the kifsei atzeres, and the shtei lechem doesn't get kedusha till after the zrika of shaloi l'shma. Well, then you need the zrika as well. Zokt Gemara no. Afilu Tamer Rebbe Lezer bar Shimon, who holds over there that the lechem isn't kaddish until the shchita and the zrika is l'shma. Here the shchita alone will do it. Why? Hacha b'may askinan kagoin shekibel daman bekois v'nishpach. What happened over here was there was already a kabbalah sadam. And we know kol oimid li zarek kezarek dami. So since he made the Kabbalah, we look at it as if there was already a Zrika Saddam, and that's why it triggers a Chedushas Aguf on the Nesachim, and that's why Imladu, they're possible enough. And then V'nishbach, and then after the Kabbalah was made, then it spilled out. Because if it spilled straight to the ground, that would be something that was never royal as Rika, because you have to be Makabal at first in the Keli. Once you're Makabal the dam first in the Keli, it is now royal as Rika. Zog to Gemara, for Abelazar Bashemin, Savar lo kavasei davua, the Omar kaloimid lizroi kazarak dami, and therefore once the Kabbalah was made, we look at this Rika as it was made already, and that's why it links its Mekadesh the Nesachim. Omar Mar. Let's go back to understand our Mishnah. Im yesh zevach achar yikrevu imay. If there's another carbon to which we can apply these nesachim, so let's do that. Frag the Gemara, v'yomer abchista shemen shefrishu l'shum mincha zeh. If you offer shemen to be part of mincha A, pasol l'shum mincha acherish, you can't misapply it. So how could you misapply the Nesachim? Don't forget, we're already at the point where the Nesachim would be possible lina. So they're already called Pekushas Aguf. How could you just divert it to a different carbon? Rabbi Yanai, you know why? Really, you can't. You can't. Because as you see, it's already linked to a carbon. If it got Kedushas Aguf through the Shechita of the carbon. But there's a special halacha that we had before as well. Lev Bezdin Masna Lehem. There's an automatic built-in kavana whenever something is given. Whenever the sachim are given, that in hotzruchu, if they're going to be needed for the purpose that we seem to be makdish it for, so be it. But vimlav, if something will happen, like in our case, where the carbon went bad, and now these nesachim are no longer needed for this carbon, then Yehula Zevach Achar, it's allowed to be diverted for the purposes of a different carbon. Frank Gemara, if you hold of that halacha, so ihaki shemen nami. Shemen, we just said that if you remember shemen l'shom mincha zeh, it's possible l'shom mincha acheres. Zakt Gemara, there's a very big difference. Shemen gufa de mincha. Shemen is an integral ingredient of a mincha that we're not going to divert. But the yain is not part of the carbon; it's an accessory to the carbon. Frank Gemara, so big deal. Velisni alein the nefka l'chulun. Make the same tonight. Why should oil go to waste if something goes wrong? Zakt Gemara, because gzeir shema yoimru maitzin michli shares l'choil. People are going to see the oil was in the klei shares, was ready to go to become a mincha, and poof, now you're going to use it for something else. They're going to think that the klei shares is not makdish. Frek Gemara, and with wine, is it any different? Hashtanami gzeir shema yoimru nesachem sherfrishon l'shum zevach zeh ksherin l'shum zevach acher. Zakt Gemara, true, but we have a way around that. Because Atani Metasha ben Yehuda, the wine is not connected to the carbon. You have wine in a keli, and it's sitting there. It happens to be that there are two carbonis that were shechted. Nobody knows which carbon this wine is dedicated to. You don't tell. So by diverting the wine from carbon A to carbon B, nobody will know the difference. But if there was only one carbon that they were shechting at that point, and there's no other components around, and it goes bad, then in fact you would not be able to apply the wine anywhere else. So you're going to tell me we let it become possible, you can't do anything with it? The problem is, Adatani Seifa, the Seifa says, Imlanu Yifsulu Belina. Frank to Gemara, I have a much simpler, much closer comparison. Live like Velisni B'dida. By Medavar Mamurim that you could apply to Zevach Achar is Shahisha Zevach Zevuch Boisa Shah. Avolain Zevach Zevuch Boisa Shah. If there's no other carbon that this could be easily connected to, Loi. And that's what I should say, not Li Yusufu Belina. You don't even need Lina. If there's no other carbon, it's possible. Zok to Gemara, Hakanami Kamar, that's really what the Mishnah means to say. We treat it like it was possible because there's no eitzah for it, Psulim, and basically you're going to leave it over, it's going to become possible. Frank Gemara, mi Eslei, Li Rab Shimon, Lev Bezn Mas Naleim. There's a Shimon Bechlal hold of this whole idea of Lev Bezn Mas Naleim. The Amar of Idi Bar Avin, Amar of Amram, Amar of Yitzchak, Amar of Yochanan. They always had like a 3 or 4 day supply of carbonis lined up for the carbon tumid. But when they go to the new lishka, because they now collected nushkalim for the new year, we have some excess carbonis. What do you do with them? L'divrei Rab Shimon ein niftin tamidin. You can't just be pointing them. You don't say love bez nemas nalayim and you could apply them for something else. Rather, you have to wait till they get a mum and then you're pointing them. So the question is, we just said Reb Shimon knows Lev Bezin Mas Nalayim, but you see not like that. So tomorrow, shiny also by the carbotomid the itlu da kanta b're'iyah. If in fact you have another way to do it without using Lev Bezin Mas Nalayim, we would rather. But by these nesachim, there's no answer for them because the carbon became possible, and now this wine is going to be thrown out. You can't be pointed. So therefore, we'll say Lev Bezin Mas Nalayim. So look more weiter. Vlad toida, if someone has a carbon toida and it gives birth, what do you do with that animal? Or tumurasa, if someone said arezu tumurazu, or hifrish toida v'avda, you were mechuyev a toida, you were mafresh a toida, and then it got lost. So now you have to bring another one, and then you find the other one. Eina tu'una lechem. So the extra one. So these are all examples of having an extra taida. They don't need lechem. You can just bring them as a carbon taida like a regular shlomim. Shenemar vehikriv al zevach hataida. Hataida tuna lechem. Only the real taida is tuna lechem. V'loy vlada, v'loy chalufa, v'loy tumurasa tu'unin lechem. Tana rabbanim. Ma'u oiber. It says Toida Yakriv. This is a little bit of an interesting type of limud. Toida Yakriv. Minayin lemafresh toidasai va'avda. How do you know that if you were mafresh your toida and they got lost, v'hivrish acheres tachtel, and you were mafresh another one because you owe a toida, v'nimtus harishayna, and now you found the first one, and now you have two animals. Which one are you makriv for your toida? How does he know that for the toida he could pick either one of these two karbanos, and then it will be accompanied with the lachme toida? Talmud Loimer, ha toida yakriv. You could pick either one that you want. You might think, now you're going to have to be makriv the other one. Maybe the other one will also need lechem when you makriv it. Talmud Loimer yakrivenu. Now it doesn't say yakriv; it actually only says yakrivenu. It says im al toida yakrivenu. So we're dashing the word yakrivenu in two stages. That's why this is like a little bit interesting type of limud. Echad v'lo shnayim. Only one of these two karbanis will receive the lachmi toida, but not both. Acha shuriba kasav umiyat. About you have a riboy and a miyat, which is also not a typical way of applying this svar. Acha shuriba kasav umiyat. We remind. Oh, you only have to bring one animal, and only one animal. You have to bring both animals, but one animal doesn't get lechem. Min lain lerabois v'lodois v'chalifois utmurois lakrava. We're only discussing when you were mechuyev toida and you were mafresh both. You were mafresh them both individually because you thought you needed another one because one of them went missing. But what about cases where that's not what happened? What if it's a case where you yourself made a second carbon because you wanted to and no one forced you to? For instance, minayin l'rabbis v'lodois. V'lodois came by itself. You weren't looking to make another animal, or v'chalifos, or tumurois. L'krava. How do you know there also you do both? Talmud Loimar im al toida, meaning im al toida is darshan if anything that came in addition to another toida. Im al toida, if there was an additional animal over this toida. Yochol yutunois lechem. I might have thought that all these would also require their own sets of breads. Tamlom v'hikriv al zevach hatoida. Dafka toida to lechem v'loy v'loda v'loy chavelufa v'loy tumurasa to unin lechem. Shalach Rab Chanina Mishmei Rabbi Yochanan loy shanu elo la'achar kapara. This is only after the kapara. Avalofnei kapara to unin lechem. This is a cryptic halacha that will need a lot of explanation, which we're going to get on Amar Aleph. But let's just get on to Amar Aleph. Havi bar Rabbi Amar. Rabbi Amar was clearing ahaya. What exactly is Rabbi Yochanan on what specific case is Rabbi Yochanan referring to when he made this distinction between before kapara and la'achar kapara? Ilema chalife toidas chayva. If it's on chalipin of a toidas chayva, what is a toidas chayva? Rashi says kagoyin the Omar harei alai. It's speaking where he said harei alai, so there's a chiyuv upon him to bring it. Going to Omar alai, to have Allah chayva. There's a personal chiyuv on him to fulfill this carbon, even if this animal goes missing. The hachamash malay de Rabbi Yochanan amas nisin kamahader. He understands that Rabbi Yochanan is commenting on the Mishnah. The katani v'loy vlad v'loy chalufa tuna lechem. It says the vlad or the chiluf of the carbon does not need lechem. We just brought limudim for it. Umasnizin b'toidas chayva kamari. The Mishnah is only speaking in a case where we said arei alai toida, so there's a chiv on him. The midikatani hifresh acheres tachta michlal the toidas chayvahi. The fact that it said hifresh acheres tachta, that's one of the cases in the Mishnah. What do you mean acheres tachta? If you said arei zu and it goes missing, it's not your problem. Hifresh acheres tachtel is only relevant if there's a chrayis, meaning the Amar alai. The lo have a chayva, lo have a mafresh acheres tachtel. If he only said arezu on the original taida and they went missing, he wouldn't have to be mafresh acheres tachtel. Umasnisin stomach atani, the leka lamash mamidi ilafnei kapara mari ila acher kapara. It's not clear from the Mishnah if the original carbon you were makav already or not. Come Rabbi Yochanan loishanu. Rabbi Yochanan said loishanu. Ilay machalifa toida chayva. So ilafnei kapara tenina. If it's before the kapara, we had a brisa here a second ago that says beferish that you have to be makrav one, and ila acha kapara. And if that tenina, the brisa already says as well. If it's achar kapara, you bring it and you don't bring the lechem. So what chiddush is Rabbi Yochanan telling us about bringing lechem, not bringing lechem? The Brisa says it black and white. What new information is Rabbi Yochanan bringing to the table? Zok to Gemara, Ella a Khalifa Toidos Nedava. It must be referring to Khalifa Toidos Nedava. Bein lefnei kapara, bein la'acher kapara, to unois lachem. Zok Rashi, Ella a Khalifa Toidos Nedava. Damar Rezu v'Avda, and the what missing. Umafresh acheres tachto. He was mafresh another one, which he didn't have to, but he did anyway. Kloimar da seifa da brisa. We're going on the seifa of this brisa. The kamar minayin mura v'chalibin the stomach atoni the kamash malon b'chilufe toida nedava, and on that v'amar b'yochanan lo yishanu ella lefnei kapar la'ach kapar. So by chaliva toida it says bein lefnei kapar bein la'ach kapar tunis lechem. You know what, I'm going to stop here. I didn't prepare this, but I had to get out to Amud Aleph, so I pushed. But we'll stop here. We'll mention Mibamshach tomorrow.